Sell me these roses in Arabic and I'll pay you $100,000, the millionaire mocked, then froze in silence. The first thing everyone noticed about the man was his laugh. It was sharp, careless, the kind that cut through the air and made people turn their heads even before they saw the tailored suit or the diamond watch flashing under the afternoon sun. Daniel Whitmore stood at the edge of the city square, surrounded by his assistants and a small crowd, enjoying the attention as if it were oxygen. He had built his empire on confidence, but somewhere along the way, confidence had hardened into arrogance. Across the square, barely noticed, stood a young woman holding a basket of roses. Her name was Mary Collins. Her coat was worn, her shoes thin, and her hands trembled not from the cold but from exhaustion. She had been on her feet since dawn, trying to sell flowers to strangers who avoided her eyes. Every rose represented hope, rent money, groceries, maybe medicine for her father. And hope, she was learning, was not an easy thing to sell. Daniel's eyes landed on her by accident. Perhaps it was the contrast, his world of wealth and power clashing with her quiet struggle. He smirked and gestured toward her. "You," he called out, loud enough for others to hear. "Come here." Mary hesitated. Being summoned rarely meant kindness. Still, she walked toward him, clutching her basket like a shield. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. "Mary," she replied softly. He picked up a rose, inspecting it like a product on a shelf. "Tell me, Mary, how much for these?" $5 each, sir." Daniel laughed. $5 for a flower that'll wilt by morning. He glanced at the crowd, enjoying their reaction. Then, as if struck by a sudden idea, his eyes lit up. "I'll make you a deal." Mary looked up unsure. "Sell me these roses in Arabic," Daniel said, his voice dripping with mockery, "and I'll pay you $100,000. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some smiled, others winced. Mary froze. Arabic. The word echoed in her mind like a door slamming shut. She didn't speak Arabic, not fluently at least. Her heart pounded as shame crept up her throat. "I'm sorry," she said. "I can't." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Ka, or woe," he leaned closer. "It's a simple language challenge unless," he shrugged, "unless you're not worth the effort." The words landed like stones. Mary lowered her gaze. Memories rushed in uninvited, her childhood home, the sound of her mother's voice reading from an old book, the nights spent translating words for her father after her mother died. Arabic prayers whispered in hospital rooms. She hadn't spoken it in years. Fear wrapped around her, tight and suffocating. The crowd waited. Daniel checked his watch. Then Marian hailed. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. She lifted a rose and began to speak. The words flowed slowly at first, then with growing strength. She didn't just translate. She told a story of roses as symbols of patience, of love that survives deserts and droughts, of beauty that blooms even when no one is watching. The square fell silent. Daniel's smile vanished. He stared at her as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. The Arabic wasn't perfect, but it was sincere, poetic, alive. And something else stirred in him, something he hadn't felt in years. Recognition. His mother's voice. She had spoken Arabic too. A woman who sold flowers when he was a child, who whispered foreign words while braiding his hair, who taught him that dignity wasn't measured by money. He hadn't thought of her in decades. He hadn't wanted to. Mary finished speaking and lowered the rose. Her hands shook again, this time from the weight of what she had dared to do. Daniel said nothing. Seconds passed. The assistants shifted uncomfortably. The crowd held its breath. Finally, Daniel exhaled, long and uneven. His eyes glistened, though he tried to hide it. "Where did you learn that?" he asked quietly. "My mother," Mary replied. "She believed words could open hearts." Daniel nodded slowly. She was right. He reached into his jacket, not for show this time, but with purpose. He wrote a check, tore it out, and handed it to her. $100,000, he said, "not because you spoke Arabic, but because you reminded me of something I forgot." Mary stared at the check, disbelief flooding her face. Tears spilled freely now, unashamed. "Thank you," she whispered. But Daniel wasn't finished. "What are you really doing here, Mary?" he asked. She hesitated, then told him everything: her father's illness, the bills, the fear of losing their small apartment, the nights she prayed for a miracle while knowing miracles were rare. Daniel listened. That, more than the check, stunned the crowd. "I don't believe this was an accident," he said at last. "Come to my office tomorrow, not for charity but for work. I need people who remember where they come from." Mary nodded, barely able to speak. As she walked away, the roses lighter in her arms than they had ever been. The crowd erupted into applause, not for Daniel but for her. Daniel stood alone, staring at the square that had suddenly become a mirror. He realized the real challenge had never been the Arabic. It had been humility, and for the first time in years, he felt something soften inside his chest. That evening, Mary returned home with groceries, medicine, and hope. She told her father the story, and he smiled through his pain, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Daniel, meanwhile, sat in his penthouse holding a single rose he had kept. It was already beginning to wilt, yet to him it had never been more alive. The next morning, Mary showed up at his office. And Daniel showed up as well, not as a millionaire mocking a stranger, but as a man ready to remember the values he once learned at his mother's knee. The challenge had changed them both. Because sometimes the greatest wealth isn't in what you can buy, but in what you're brave enough to remember.